Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to our YouTube channel, Goofy Harry, and today we will see a crossover between Harry Potter and Percy Jackson and Olympians. So today we will see what if Harry Potter was. So today we are gonna see what if Harry Potter was neglected son of goddess Hecate. Now, without any further delay, let's get straight to the video. But before that, please make sure to subscribe and also share this video as much as you can. Now, without any further delay, let's get straight to the video.
The dogs came first. Harry noticed them when he was 6 strays, mostly the kind of rangy mutts that skulked around little whingings bins looking for scraps. They'd find him on his walk to school, pad alongside him in 2s and 3s, tongues lolling, ears pricked forward like he was the most interesting thing they'd seen in years. Mrs. Fig's cats did the same, though cats were subtler about it. They'd appear on fences and windowsills, tracking his path with luminous eyes, and Harry would feel a warmth in his chest that he couldn't explain. Aunt Petunia hated the dogs. She called animal control 3 times in 1 month before giving up. "They're not our dogs." She'd hiss at the neighbours, as though the animal's devotion to her nephew was a personal insult. Which, knowing Petunia, it probably was. Harry didn't mind the dogs. He didn't mind much of anything, really, which was perhaps the strangest thing about him. A boy locked in a cupboard under the stairs should have been angry or broken or desperate. Harry Potter was none of those things. Not because he was numb, far from it. He felt everything with an intensity that sometimes frightened him. But beneath the feeling, beneath the loneliness and the hunger and his uncle's meaty hand shoving him toward the cupboard door, there was something else. A hum. It had been there as long as he could remember, a low, resonant vibration in his bones, like the whole world was a plucked string and he could feel it singing. When he was very young, he'd thought everyone could hear it. He'd asked Aunt Petunia once, tugging on her skirt with sticky fingers, why the air was shining. She'd gone white as chalk and sent him to his cupboard for 3 days. That was when Harry stopped asking questions. Not because he was afraid, because he understood that the answers wouldn't come from people like the Dursleys. They couldn't see what he saw. They couldn't feel what he felt. And that was fine. He'd figure it out himself. By 7 he had. The shining in the air wasn't just light. It was everything, threads and currents and rivers of something that flowed through the world like blood through veins. It pooled in certain places. The old oak tree in Mrs. Fig's garden, the cracked fountain in the park, the spot where Magnolia Crescent met Wisteria Walk. That last one was the strongest. A crossroads. 2 roads meeting, and where they met, the shining stuff swirled and eddied like water around a stone. Harry spent hours at that crossroads. He'd sit on the curb with his 2 big shoes and his cousin's hand-me-down clothes, and he'd watch. The currents moved in patterns. They responded to things, emotions, intentions, the phases of the moon. When Harry was sad, they dimmed. When he was angry, they crackled and spat. And when he was calm, truly calm, they'd drift toward him like the dogs did, like the cats did, like everything alive and magical in Little Whinging was slowly, inevitably drawn to the skinny boy in the broken glasses. He started experimenting on his 3rd day at the crossroads. Small things first. He'd reach for a thread of the shining stuff and pull, gently, and a pebble would lift from the gutter and hover in the air. He'd twist a current and Dudley's bedroom light would flicker. He'd press his palm flat against the ground at the crossroads center and feel the whole neighborhood laid out beneath him like a map, every living thing a spark, every emotion a color. By 8 he could do it without touching anything. A thought, a flex of intention, and the world bent. By 9, he'd taught himself to become invisible. Not truly invisible, he was still there, solid and real. But he could wrap the shining threads around himself like a cloak and people's eyes would slide right off him. It was useful for avoiding Dudley and his gang. It was useful for getting into the library after hours. It was useful for a lot of things. By 10, Harry Potter could move objects with his mind, start and stop fires with a glance, heal cuts on his own skin by pushing warm light into them, speak to animals in something that wasn't language but worked better, and see in the dark as easily as daylight. He could also do something he'd never seen anyone else do, something that felt as natural as breathing. He could stand at any crossroads, any place where paths diverged, and feel the futures branching out from that point like roots from a tree. Not clearly, not specifically, just possibilities blooming and fading, some bright, some dark. He didn't know what he was, but he knew he wasn't normal, wasn't ordinary, wasn't anything the Dursleys or their world had a word for. and he knew with a certainty that lived in his marrow that someone was watching him, not the dogs. Not Mrs. Fig, though she watched too in her twitchy, cat-surrounded way. Someone else. Something else. He'd feel it at night sometimes, lying in his cupboard with spiders spinning webs above his head, a vast, warm attention, like the moon pressing its light through the walls just for him. It didn't frighten him. It felt like being remembered. The summer he turned 11 was the hottest little Whinging had seen in years. The Dursleys' lawn turned brown and brittle, despite Uncle Vernon's increasingly purple-faced efforts with the garden hose. Dudley broke his new television by throwing a game controller at it, and then blamed Harry, which earned Harry a week of no meals that he circumvented by pulling ripe apples off the neighbour's tree from 30 feet away, without moving from his cupboard. He'd float them through the gap under the door, one by one, silent as secrets. The letters started arriving on a Tuesday. Harry saw the owl before anyone else did, a tawny thing, proud and ruffled, dropping a heavy envelope through the mail slot with an air of great importance. He felt the letter before he saw it too. It practically vibrated with the shining stuff. Whoever had written it had poured intention into every word, every stroke of ink. The emerald lettering on the front, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, glowed to his eyes like a lantern. He knew what it was. Not the specifics, not yet. But standing at 1,000 crossroads had taught him to recognize a turning point when it arrived. Uncle Vernon got to the letter first. Harry watched from the kitchen doorway as his uncle's face cycled through its usual palette. Pink, red, purple, white, and then Vernon tore the letter in half with hands that shook badly. "No," Vernon said. "Absolutely not. We swore we'd stamp it out of him." Petunia at the stove didn't turn around. Her shoulders went rigid. "I told you they'd come eventually." "Well, they can uncome. I won't have it, Petunia, not in my house." Harry could have intervened. He could have plucked the torn halves from his uncle's hands without Vernon even noticing. He could have read it, learned its secrets, and decided for himself. But there was something interesting about watching the Dursleys panic. It told him things. This letter, whatever school, whatever world it represented, was connected to his parents, to his mother, and the Dursleys had been keeping it from him for 10 years. He filed that away. Patience was a skill he'd mastered in the cupboard under the stairs. More letters came. Harry watched, almost amused, as Vernon boarded up the mail slot. Then the windows, then dragged the entire family to a series of increasingly absurd hiding places, a dingy hotel off the motorway, a field in the middle of nowhere, and finally, in a fit of inspiration that Harry privately thought was approaching madness, a tiny shack on a rock in the middle of the sea. The shack was miserable. Rain lashed the walls. Wind screamed through cracks in the boards. Dudley whimpered on the sagging couch while Vernon and Petunia took the only bedroom. Harry lay on the floor with a thin blanket and watched the clock tick toward midnight. 11 years old. His birthday. He felt it coming before he heard it. A disturbance in the currents, something massive and warm and thoroughly alive, approaching across the water with a cheerful disregard for the storm. Harry sat up. The shining threads in the air were swirling with excitement, clustering toward the door like iron filings drawn to a magnet. At exactly midnight, someone knocked. The door didn't so much open as surrender. It crashed inward off its rusted hinges, and there, filling the doorframe like a mountain stuffed into a leather coat, was the largest man Harry had ever seen. Wild black hair, wild black beard. Small, bright eyes that crinkled at the corners with a warmth that seemed wildly out of place given that he'd just broken down a door in the middle of a hurricane. "Sorry aboo that," the man said, picking up the door and leaning it back against the frame with surprising delicacy. He shook rain from his coat, sending a small flood across the floor, and then his eyes found Harry. Something happened in those eyes. A flash of emotion, recognition, tenderness, old grief, that the man quickly buried under a massive smile. "Harry, last time I saw you, you was only a baby." "Ye look a lot like your dad, but ye have got your mum's eyes," Harry said. "I know." He stood up. He was small for his age, the Dursleys' idea of nutrition had seen to that, but he stood straight and met the giant man's gaze without flinching, without fear. He could feel the magic radiating off this man like heat from a furnace, warm, rough-edged, enormous in volume if not in finesse. This was someone from his mother's world. "You're here about the letter," Harry said. "It wasn't a question." The giant blinked. "Well, yeah I am." "How'd you, did the Dursleys tell ye?" The Dursleys haven't told me anything in 10 years. Harry glanced toward the bedroom door behind which Vernon was working himself into what sounded like a cardiac event. Who are you? Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Yale know all about Hogwarts, of course. I don't. Tell me. There was something in the way Harry said it, calm, direct, with the quiet authority of someone used to figuring things out for himself, that made Hagrid pause. The big man studied him for a moment, and Harry saw the warmth in those eyes deepen into something more complex. Concern, maybe, or awe. Hogwarts, Hagrid said, settling himself onto the broken couch, which groaned in protest, is a school for wizards and witches. You're a wizard, Harry. I know. That stopped Hagrid cold. Yay, no. I've known for years. I can see it, the magic. I can feel it everywhere, in everything. It's in you right now, mostly concentrated around your coat pockets and that pink umbrella you're carrying, which I'm fairly sure has a wand inside it. Hagrid's mouth opened and closed. His hand moved instinctively toward the umbrella. But I want to hear about Hogwarts, Harry continued, and about my parents, how they died, why I ended up with the Dursleys, everything. That is enough. Vernon Dursley exploded from the bedroom in a nightshirt that strained across his belly like a sail in high wind. His face had achieved a shade of purple that Harry thought might actually be medically significant. I forbid it. I will not have some freak waltzing into my house and filling the boy's head with. Harry didn't raise his hand. He didn't speak. He simply looked at Vernon, and something in the air shifted. The shining threads around Harry tightened, drew close, and the temperature in the room dropped 2 degrees. Vernon's mouth was still moving, but no sound came out. His eyes went wide. I'd like to hear what Hagrid has to say, Uncle Vernon, Harry said quietly. Please go back to bed. Vernon Dursley stared at his nephew. For 10 years he'd bullied this boy, starved him, locked him in a cupboard, tried to crush the strangeness out of him through sheer mundane brutality. And for the first time, looking into those green eyes, Vernon understood in some dim, animal way that he'd been trying to stomp out a bonfire with a bare foot. He went back to bed. Petunia went with him, but she paused at the door and looked back at Harry with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. Not hatred, not disgust, fear. She closed the door softly behind her. Hagrid was staring at Harry with his mouth hanging open. Blimey, he whispered. How did ye? It's fine. Tell me about my parents. Hagrid told him. Some of it anyway. Harry could feel the gaps, the places where Hagrid skipped or stumbled, where the truth had been replaced with an approved version. His parents were a witch and wizard. They'd fought against a dark lord named Voldemort. They'd been killed on Halloween night, and Harry had survived the killing curse, a thing that had never happened before or since. No one knows how ye did it, Hagrid said, dabbing his eyes with a tablecloth-sized handkerchief. You know whose curse just bounced. Left ye with that scar and killed him instead. Well, killed his body anyway. Harry touched the lightning bolt on his forehead. He'd always known it was significant. It tingled constantly, a thin thread of something dark woven into his skin like a splinter. He'd examined it 100 times with his inner sight and found it strange, a fragment of foreign magic, oily and wrong, encased in something bright and golden that kept it contained. Like a pearl formed around a grain of sand. You said no one knows why I survived, Harry said. Do you believe that? Hagrid shifted uncomfortably. Well, Professor Dumbledore, he has his theories. Great man, Dumbledore. He's the one who asked me to bring ye your letter and take ye to get your school things. Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts, the very same. Greatest wizard of the age, Harry. If anyone can help ye understand what happened that night, it's him. Harry filed that away too. A powerful wizard who had theories about Harry's survival, who'd placed him with the Dursleys, who'd sent a letter addressed to the cupboard under the stairs but apparently hadn't seen fit to check on that living situation in 10 years. Interesting. When do we go? Harry asked. Hagrid beamed. Tomorrow. Well, today, I suppose. Happy birthday, Harry. He produced a squashed chocolate cake from one of his vast pockets, and Harry felt something crack in his chest, not magic, something more human. No one had ever given him a birthday cake before. Thank you, Hagrid. He said, and meant it with everything he had. They left the rock at dawn. Hagrid had a flying motorcycle, which Harry found delightful, though he kept that largely to himself. The big man chattered happily as they flew through grey English skies, and Harry listened and watched the world below. The shining threads were thicker near cities, thinner in the countryside, and there were places where they knotted and swirled in ways that suggested hidden things. Magical places, maybe. He counted 7 between the coast and London. The Leaky Cauldron was a revelation, not because of the pub itself, it was dark and shabby, smelling of pipe smoke and old beer, but the magic. Harry stepped through the door and the shining threads were suddenly everywhere, thick as soup, brilliant and varied. Every person in the pub radiated their own particular frequency, and beneath it all, the building itself hummed with centuries of accumulated enchantment. And then everyone recognized him. The pub went silent, heads turned, an old man in a top hat dropped his drink. And then they swarmed, hands reaching out, voices babbling, Harry Potter, it's really him, the boy who lived, and Harry stood in the middle of it, small and thin in Dudley's enormous clothes, and felt the crossroads bloom beneath his feet. This was a turning point. He could feel the futures branching. He could be the stammering, overwhelmed child they expected. He could let them shake his hand and worship their legend, or he could be himself. Harry smiled genuinely, warmly, because these people were ridiculous and earnest, and he found that he liked them already, and shook every hand that was offered. He remembered every name. He asked the old man in the top hat, Daedalus Diggle, where he'd gotten such a fine hat, and Diggle nearly wept with joy. Hagrid watched with an expression of profound bewilderment. This was not the reaction he'd expected from a boy raised in a cupboard. Then a pale young man in a purple turban pushed through the crowd, and Harry's smile froze. The magic around this man was wrong. It took Harry a half-second to understand why, and when he did, something cold settled in his stomach. There were 2 magical signatures coming from Professor Quirrell, his own, weak and fluttering, and beneath it, wound through it like a parasite, something dark and powerful and horribly familiar, the oily, wrong magic. The same frequency as the splinter in his scar, Voldemort. Harry P. Potter, Quirrell stammered, extending a trembling hand. Such an honour. Harry took the hand. He felt the dark magic flinch at his touch, recoil like a slug from salt, and beneath Quirrell's turban, he sensed something scream in silent fury. Professor Quirrell, Harry said pleasantly. Lovely to meet you. What do you teach? Defense against the dark arts, how appropriate. Their eyes met, and Harry held the gaze for 1 heartbeat longer than necessary. Not a threat, just an acknowledgement. I see you, I see what's hiding inside you, and I am not afraid. Then he let go, smiled, and turned back to Hagrid. Shall we? Diagon Alley was extraordinary, not because of the shops, though they were wonderful, cauldrons and owls and broomsticks, and 1,000 things Harry had never imagined. What struck him was the architecture of the magic. Whoever had built this place had woven enchantments into the very stones, layer upon layer, century after century, until the whole alley thrummed like a cathedral organ. Harry could read it like a book. Protection wards here, preservation charms there, concealment spells woven into the boundary between the magical street and Muggle London like a tapestry. It was beautiful. It was also, he noticed, remarkably limited. Every enchantment was structured the same way, rigid, formulaic, channeled through wands and incantations and strict magical theory. Like someone had taken the wild, infinite ocean of magic and forced it through a series of increasingly narrow pipes. It worked, certainly. But it was like listening to someone play a single note on a piano and call it music. Harry could hear the whole symphony. Gringotts came first. The goblins fascinated him. Their magic was different from wizard magic, older and stranger, tied to earth and metal and deep places. The one who led them to the Potter Vault, a sharp-eyed creature named Griffook, kept glancing at Harry with an expression that wasn't quite respect and wasn't quite fear. You see the wards, Griffook said suddenly as their cart plunged through the underground tunnels. It wasn't a question. Yes. Harry said, no wizard has seen goblin wards in 300 years. They're impressive. The layering technique, you fold the enchantments into each other, don't you, so each one reinforces the others. Griffook stared at him for a long moment, then showed his teeth in something that might have been a smile. You are not what I expected, Mr. Potter. I get that a lot. The vault was full of gold. Harry took what he needed, neither impressed nor dismissive. Money was useful but not interesting. What interested him was Vault 713, the one Hagrid cleared out with obvious anxiety, pocketing a small, grubby package that radiated old, strange magic. Harry didn't ask. He simply noted the way the magic felt, alchemical, transmutative, and ancient, and added it to the growing map inside his head. They bought his school things through the morning. Robes at Madame Malkin's, where Harry stood on a stool next to a blonde boy with a pointed chin and the most extraordinary magical signature Harry had ever seen from someone his own age. The boy's magic was bright, sharp, tightly controlled, and completely dominated by a pattern that wasn't his own. Someone had been shaping this boy's magical development from birth, imposing structure and limitation. It looked almost like a cage. Hogwarts, too. The boy said with the casual arrogance of someone who'd been told he was important since birth. Yes. Know what house you'll be in. I'm going to be in Slytherin, of course. My whole family's been in Slytherin. I don't know yet. I'm looking forward to finding out. I'm Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. Harry Potter. The boy's eyes went wide, then narrow, cycling through surprise and calculation with remarkable speed. Harry could almost see the gears turning, political value, social positioning, the internalized lessons of a pure-blood upbringing. Potter, Draco repeated, testing the name. My father's told me about your family. Has he? I'd love to hear it sometime. I know very little about them. That wrong-footed the boy entirely. He'd expected. What? Awe, hostility. Whatever script Draco Malfoy had been given for this interaction, Harry had departed from it completely. The blonde boy opened his mouth, closed it, and then, to Harry's genuine interest, something shifted behind his eyes. The calculation faded. What replaced it was curiosity. You really don't know? Draco asked. About your family, I mean. I was raised by muggles. Draco's face did something complicated. The expected sneer started to form but didn't quite complete itself, because Harry was watching him with those green eyes that seemed to see rather more than they should, and something about being seen that clearly made Draco uncomfortable. That's... Draco paused. That must have been difficult. Harry smiled. It was the most honest thing the boy had said. It was. Nice to meet you, Draco. He left Madame Malkin's with the distinct impression that Draco Malfoy was more interesting than he wanted to be. The bookshop was Harry's favourite stop. Not for the textbooks, though he bought those readily enough, but for the depth of magical knowledge contained in a single building. He bought everything on the required list, and then spent 40 minutes browsing the shelves, pulling down volumes on magical theory, ancient enchantments, the history of British magic. He noticed significant gaps, almost nothing on pre-Roman magical traditions, nothing on Greek magical theory, nothing on the divine origins of magic that he could feel humming in his very blood. Curious. A magical bookshop that seemed to have edited out the oldest, deepest magic. Harry bought what he could and resolved to dig deeper. Then came Ollivander's. The one shop was the strangest place in the alley, and Harry knew the moment he stepped inside that something significant was about to happen. The magic here was unlike anything he'd felt. Thousands of wands, each containing a core of living magical essence, lined up on shelves like sleeping soldiers. The whole shop buzzed and shivered with contained power. An old man emerged from the shelves like a ghost materializing from fog. Pale eyes, silvered hair, and a magical signature that was simultaneously faint and deep, like a still pond that went down forever. Ah, said Ollivander. Yes, I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter. He stepped closer, and those pale eyes searched Harry's face with an intensity that was almost physical. Your mother was a particular favourite of mine. Willow, 10¼ inches, swishy. Excellent for charm work. Your father, mahogany, 11 inches, pliable. A powerful wand for transfiguration. He paused. Though I suspect the relevant inheritance in your case doesn't come from either of them. Harry went very still. Ollivander smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. It was the smile of someone who had spent his entire life studying magic and had just encountered something that confirmed a very old theory. I am a wandmaker, Mr. Potter. I have been a wandmaker for a very long time, longer than most people realize. And in all that time I have met perhaps 3 individuals whose magical signature was... He trailed off, studying Harry like a jeweler studying a diamond. Like that, he finished softly. Like what? Harry asked, though he already knew or suspected. Divine. The word hung in the air between them. Hagrid was outside, dealing with something. Harry had suggested he grab them both ice cream, a gentle misdirection that the big man had accepted happily. They were alone. What do you know? Harry asked. Ollivander's pale eyes gleamed. I know that there are magics older than wands, Mr. Potter. Older than Hogwarts, older than Merlin, older than the very concept of wizardry as we practice it today. I know that the shining threads, yes, I can see you're surprised. Very few people use that phrase, were once understood as the fabric of a goddess's domain. And I know that certain bloodlines carry more than magical talent. He turned to his shelves, running his fingers along boxes with practiced precision. The question is whether any wand of mine can match you. A wand chooses the wizard, as they say, but what does a wand do when the wizard is something more? He began pulling boxes. Try this. Beechwood and dragon heartstring, 9 inches. Harry took the wand and felt. Nothing. The wand lay dead in his hand, not because it rejected him, but because it was too small, too narrow, like trying to pour the ocean through a drinking straw. He set it down. No, I thought not. Ollivander's eyes were bright with excitement. Maple and phoenix feather, no, too rigid, ebony and unicorn hair, wand after wand. Harry tried them all patiently. Some sparked, most didn't, none fit. The pile of rejected wands grew, and Ollivander's excitement grew with it. Tricky customer. Wonderful, wonderful. I do enjoy a challenge. He disappeared into the deepest recesses of the shop and returned with a box that looked older than the others, its wood dark with age, its hinges tarnished green. I wonder, he murmured. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. The phoenix whose tail feather resides in this wand gave another feather, just one other. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. Harry took the wand. Power surged through him, not foreign power but his own, reflected and amplified and given a new channel. Golden light erupted from the wand's tip, but it wasn't just gold. To Harry's sight, it was a cascade of every colour that existed and several that didn't, the full spectrum of magic blazing through this narrow wooden instrument like sunlight through a prism. The shelves rattled. Boxes toppled. The window cracked, and then it settled and the wand hummed in his hand like a living thing, warm and eager. Oh, Ollivander breathed. Oh, that's not quite right though, is it? Harry looked at him. The wand works for you, Mr. Potter. It works beautifully, but it's not enough. It's like giving a master painter a single crayon. You'll do remarkable things with it, I'm sure, but you don't need it, not the way other wizards do. Harry turned the wand in his fingers. It felt good, comfortable, like a favourite tool, well-balanced and well-made. I'll take it, he said. But you're right, it's not all of what I am. No, Ollivander agreed, it's not even close. He leaned forward and his voice dropped to a whisper that held centuries of accumulated knowing. The old magic doesn't need a channel, Mr. Potter, it is the channel. And you are something I thought I would never see in my lifetime. Your mother must have been quite remarkable. She was, Harry said with a certainty that surprised him. He'd never known Lily Potter, not consciously. But the warmth in his chest, the golden light that contained the dark splinter in his scar, that was hers. He was sure of it. He paid for the wand 7 galleons and turned to leave. Mr. Potter. He looked back. Ollivander's pale eyes were grave. Be careful at Hogwarts. Dumbledore is a great wizard, but even great wizards have blind spots, and there are those who would give a great deal to understand what you are. I know, Harry said. Thank you, Mr. Ollivander. He stepped into the sunlight of Diagon Alley and found Hagrid waiting with 2 enormous ice cream cones, beaming like a sunrise. All rig there, Harry. Perfect, Harry said, taking his ice cream. Absolutely perfect. The rest of the summer passed in a haze of reading and anticipation. Back at the Dursleys, who now left him strictly alone, which was a marked improvement, Harry devoured his textbooks in a single week and then devoured them again, not for the content but for what the content implied. The wizarding world's understanding of magic was a fraction of what magic actually was, a tiny, carefully curated fraction. Every textbook presented magic as a set of rules. Say these words, move your wand this way, and a specific effect occurs. It was like reading a chemistry textbook written by someone who'd only ever seen water and had constructed an entire theory of matter based on that single substance. Harry could see the truth. Magic wasn't rules. It was will and intention, given form through the shining threads that permeated everything. Wands were useful tools, focusing lenses that helped channel intent into specific patterns. Incantations were mnemonics, verbal shortcuts that helped the mind lock into the right configuration. But the magic itself was wild, vast, and fundamentally alive, and it responded to Harry not as a user but as— He struggled for the right word. Family. He spent his evenings at the crossroads on Magnolia Crescent, sitting in the gathering dark, feeling the threads swirl around him. The dogs came as always. He'd scratch their ears and watch the night sky and practice, not spells from his textbooks. Those he could do with barely a thought. He practiced the deeper things, sensing the ley lines that ran beneath little whinging, pushing his awareness out farther and farther, feeling the topology of magic across the English countryside. He found Hogwarts on his third night. It blazed in his inner sight like a bonfire, hundreds of miles to the north, so saturated with magic that it seemed to exist in two worlds at once. And beneath Hogwarts, far beneath it, something else. Something old and vast and dreaming, pressed against the roots of the castle like a sleeping dragon. It felt familiar, though Harry couldn't say why. On his last night before September 1st, Harry sat at the crossroads past midnight. The air was warm. The moon hung full and heavy overhead, and in its light Chapter 2, Hogwarts Has Never Seen His Kind, continued, and genuine that Harry felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't realised was tight. "That's your reaction?" Harry asked. "Wicked. Mate, my brother Charlie works with dragons. My other brothers turned my teddy bear into a spider when I was 3. My family clock has 9 hands and one of them says mortal peril. My threshold for weird is pretty high." Ron leaned back in his armchair and crossed his arms. "Besides, it explains a lot. The matchstick thing, the way you just knew stuff in potions, how the castle seems to like you. I thought you were just annoyingly good at everything. Turns out you're annoyingly good at everything because your mum shagged a goddess." "Ron," Hermione snapped, looking up from her books. "What?" "Am I wrong?" Harry laughed. Actually laughed, the kind of full-body laugh that he'd rarely experienced, and Ron looked delighted with himself. "You're not wrong," Harry said, "though I'd appreciate if you phrased it differently in public. So who else knows?" Hermione asked. She'd already gotten through 12 pages of the Hecatian tradition and was reading with the speed of someone who'd been born doing it. "About what you are," Ollivander suspects. "The Sorting Hat knows something. There's a presence beneath this castle that recognized me, ancient magic tied to Hecate, I think. And Dumbledore—" Harry paused. "Dumbledore knows something, I'm not sure how much." "What about you-know-who?" Ron asked, and the lightness left his voice. "Voldemort," Ron flinched. "Doesn't know, yet, but he's here, Ron, in the castle, attached to the back of Professor Quirrell's head like a parasite." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Ron went pale, Hermione's book lowered slowly to her lap. "You're joking," Ron whispered. "I can see magical signatures." "Quirrell has too. His own, weak, frightened, and something else. Something dark and powerful wrapped around him like a snake, the same magical frequency as my scar." Harry touched his forehead. "Voldemort survived that night. He's barely alive, clinging to Quirrell, but he's here. And he wants something in this castle." "The third-floor corridor," Hermione said immediately. "Dumbledore's warning at the feast. Die a very painful death. There's something hidden there. Something Hagrid retrieved from Gringotts on the day he took me shopping. A small package heavily warded." "It was in Vault 713. Ron and Hermione stared at him. "You noticed all that?" Hermione asked. "On your first day in the wizarding world, while everything was new and overwhelming, you noticed a specific vault number and the magical properties of a hidden package." "I notice everything. It's part of what I am. That's terrifying. I know. No, I mean genuinely terrifying. You're 11, you're half-goddess, you can see everyone's magic. Voldemort is possessing a teacher and you noticed all of it on day 1. Hermione put her book down. "Harry, what's your plan?" He looked at her. He looked at Ron. 2 children, 11 years old, sitting in a magical room in a 1,000-year-old castle, and they were asking him what the plan was. Not running, not panicking, asking. He'd chosen well. Voldemort can't get what he wants if he doesn't know what's guarding it. And he can't act openly without revealing himself to Dumbledore, who I suspect already knows, or at least suspects, that something's wrong with Quirrell. So there's a stalemate for now. "And when the stalemate breaks," Ron asked, "I'll be ready." Hermione corrected firmly, "we'll be ready." Ron nodded. What she said. Harry looked at them, Ron with his jaw set and his freckles standing out against his pale skin, Hermione with her books and her fierce determination, and felt the crossroads bloom. In one future he did this alone, kept them safe, carried the weight himself. In another, he trusted them, let them in, let them stand beside him. The second path was brighter. "All right," he said. They stayed in the hidden room until nearly midnight, talking, planning, reading. Hermione devoured the books on Hecate and ancient Greek magic with voracious intensity, occasionally reading passages aloud that made Ron's eyes glaze over and made Harry's heart race. "Listen to this," she said around 10 o'clock, sitting cross-legged in her armchair with 3 books open simultaneously. The Hecatian tradition holds that all magic flows from a single divine source, embodied in the goddess Hecate, Queen of the Crossroads, Keeper of the Keys, Lady of the Three Ways. Modern wand-based magic is understood within this tradition as a simplified derivation of the original divine art, a practical methodology developed for mortals who lack direct connection to the source. "So wand magic is like training wheels," Ron said. "That's a Muggle reference, but yes, essentially. The Greek tradition says that all wizards are using a diluted, structured version of something much vaster and more powerful." She looked at Harry. "Something you have direct access to." "It feels that way," Harry said. "When I do magic, I'm not channeling through a system. I'm just touching the raw thing, the source." "Because you're the source's son," Hermione breathed. "Harry, do you understand how unprecedented this is? If the Hecatian tradition is accurate, and everything you can do suggests it is, then you're not just a powerful wizard. You're a bridge between mortal magic and divine magic. The first one in, possibly ever." The book says possibly ever. The book says the last known child of Hecate was born in the Age of Heroes, nearly 3,000 years ago. That child went on to become the founder of the Eleusinian Mysteries. "So Harry's the first demigod in 3,000 years, Ron said. "No pressure, mate." They snuck back to Gryffindor Tower well after curfew, Hermione fretting about rule-breaking and Ron pointing out that she'd stayed up till midnight voluntarily for the first time in her life, which meant Harry was already a corrupting influence. Harry led them through the corridors without incident. The castle's magic responded to his presence, dimming torches ahead of them, subtly steering patrols away. Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat, found them on the 4th floor and stared at Harry with the unblinking devotion that all animals seem to direct his way, then walked off in the opposite direction. "Even the evil cat likes you," Ron muttered. "She's not evil. She's loyal. There's a difference. She got my brother's detention 14 times last year. Your brothers probably deserved it." Ron couldn't argue with that. The weekend opened up before them like a held breath. Saturday morning was bright and crisp, and Harry woke with the sun, left the dormitory quietly, and went to the chamber beneath Hogwarts. He needed to understand it. Not just feel it, not just bask in its power, but understand what it was, how it worked, and why it was here. The room of requirements books had given him theory. Now he needed practice. The corridor to the chamber opened for him as easily as before, the wall parting, the ancient stairs spiraling downward, the carved stone door with its 3-faced goddess recognizing his touch and dissolving like morning mist. Harry stepped into the circular chamber and felt the ley lines welcome him. He sat at the convergence point and closed his eyes. The power flowed through him, around him, vast and deep and ancient. He let himself sink into it, past the surface currents, past the structured magic of Hogwarts, down to the bedrock where the ley lines met and the world grew thin. He could feel the barrier between worlds here. It wasn't a wall, it was more like a membrane, flexible and semi-permeable, allowing magic to flow between the mortal world and somewhere else. The divine realm, Hecate's domain. Whatever name you gave it, it was there, pressing against the mortal world at this point of convergence, close enough to touch. Harry reached out. The membrane flexed. On the other side, something stirred, the same vast presence that had spoken to him at the crossroads in Little Whinging, but closer now, more present, more defined. "You found my temple," the words bloomed in his mind. Not English, not Greek, not any human language, pure meaning, transmitted directly. "Your temple." Harry thought, "I placed it here long before the mortals built their school, a seed of my power planted in the earth where the lines of magic converge. I knew even then that one day my child would need it. You knew about me. 3,000 years ago, amusement, warm and vast. I am the goddess of Crossroads, child. I stand where all paths meet. I see every future, every possibility, every branching of fate. I knew that one day a mortal woman would call to me and that I would answer, and that our union would produce something the world has not seen in millennia. Lily. My mother, your mother, was extraordinary. She reached across the void between worlds with nothing but courage and a desperate love for a world that was tearing itself apart. She performed a ritual so ancient that even I had not seen it attempted in centuries. She stood at a crossroads at midnight and called my name, and I came, and I loved her. There was something in that last phrase, a weight, a depth, an ache that was startlingly human for a goddess. Harry felt it resonate in his own chest, in the place where loneliness lived. Why didn't you protect her? The question came out sharper than he intended. If you're a goddess, if you loved her, why did you let her die? Silence, long silence. The ley lines pulsed around him. Because she asked me not to. Harry's eyes opened. The chamber was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the magical carvings on the floor. His heart was hammering. Lily knew what was coming. She knew the prophecy, knew the Dark Lord would come for you. I offered to take you both, to bring you across the membrane into my realm where no mortal magic could reach you. She refused. Why? Because she understood something that even I, in my vast age, sometimes forget. That running from evil doesn't stop it. That hiding in safety while the world burns is its own kind of death. She chose to stay. She chose to fight. And when the moment came, she chose to die, not because she had to, but because her death, her sacrifice, her love, would give you a protection that even my divine power could not. Harry felt tears on his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. A mother's willing sacrifice made at the crossroads between life and death, for a child who carries divine blood. It is the most powerful magic in existence, Harry, not because I decreed it. Because love, freely given, freely sacrificed, is the one force that neither gods nor mortals can overcome. The killing curse hit that love. The killing curse hit your mother's sacrifice, wrapped around my divine essence, held together by a love so fierce that it burned the darkest magic in the world to nothing. The Dark Lord never had a chance. He threw a pebble at the sun. Harry sat in the dark chamber beneath Hogwarts and wept. Not with grief, though grief was there, with understanding, with gratitude. With the staggering weight of knowing that his mother, his human, mortal, extraordinary mother, had been offered paradise and chosen death because it was the right thing to do. Lily Evans hadn't just loved him. She'd trusted him. Trusted that her sacrifice would be enough, that her son would be strong enough, that the protection she purchased with her life would hold until Harry could stand on his own. And it had. I have to go, Harry thought. My friends will wonder where I am. Your friends. Warmth. Approval. Yes, go to them. The temple will be here when you return. It will always be here. Will I see you, really see you, not just feel you when you are ready? When the barriers are thinnest at a crossroads between worlds under a three-faced moon, I will come to you, my son, I promise. The connection faded. The chamber dimmed. Harry wiped his face, stood up and left the chamber with a steadiness that felt hard-won and precious. He emerged into the castle to find Hermione waiting for him at the top of the dungeon stairs, arms crossed, foot tapping. Where have you been? Ron's having a crisis because someone told him there's a chess tournament and he doesn't have a decent set. And I've been looking for you for an hour, and, have you been crying? Harry looked at her. This brilliant, fierce girl who'd decided to be his friend after 2 days and was already prepared to hunt him through the castle when she was worried. I found something, he said. Beneath the castle, I'll tell you about it, but right now I need to help Ron with his chess problem. Hermione opened her mouth to protest, saw something in his eyes and closed it. Fine, she said, but you're telling me everything later. Everything, he promised. Ron's chess crisis was resolved by the simple expedient of Harry asking the room of requirement for a chess set. The room provided a magnificent 1 marble pieces, hand-carved, that moved with authoritative precision, and Ron fell in love with it so immediately and so completely that Hermione declared the chess set the great love of Ron's life. Don't be jealous, Ron said, already setting up the board. You could be the second great love of my life if you learned to play. Hermione turned pink and buried her face in a book, which was her solution to most emotional situations. They spent Saturday afternoon in the room of requirement, their room, as it was becoming, a secret space that belonged to the 3 of them. Harry told them about the chamber, about the conversation with Hecate, about his mother's sacrifice. He told them everything, holding nothing back, and they listened with the grave attention of people who understood that they were being trusted with something enormous. When he finished, Ron was quiet for a long time. "Your mum was brilliant," he said finally. "She was. I mean, she had a goddess offering her a way out and she said no, because it was the right thing. He shook his head, that's the bravest thing I've ever heard." "The Sorting Hat said Harry's courage came from Lily," Hermione said softly. "That makes sense now," Harry nodded. He felt lighter than he had in days. Sharing the weight didn't diminish it, but it made it bearable. "So what's the plan?" Ron asked, because Ron was always ultimately practical. "You've got a goddess mum, a dead Dark Lord possessing a teacher, something hidden on the 3rd floor, and Dumbledore playing some kind of long game. What do? We learn," Harry said. "Everything we can as fast as we can. Hermione, those books on the Hecatian tradition, I need you to become an expert. The Greek magical system is the key to understanding what I can do and what Voldemort might try to do." Hermione's eyes lit up like someone had given her Christmas early. "Done. Ron, I need your strategic mind. Voldemort's not stupid. Dumbledore's not stupid. They're both making moves and I need someone who can think like them. Map the board, figure out who's doing what and why." Ron sat up straighter. His ears went red, but his eyes were sharp. "I can do that, and I'll keep training. The room, the chamber, whatever I can access. My power is raw, I need to understand it, control it, learn its limits if it has any." "What about Quirrell?" Hermione asked. "If Voldemort's really possessing him, Quirrell's not making a move yet. He's gathering information, waiting for the right moment. The protections on the 3rd floor are keeping him out. Dumbledore set it up that way, I think deliberately, as a trap." "A trap for Voldemort?" Ron asked, "or a test for me? They all considered this." "That's a bit dark, isn't it?" Ron said. "Setting up a test that involves a Dark Lord for an 11-year-old. Dumbledore doesn't know what I am. He suspects I'm powerful, but he doesn't know why. I think he's trying to measure me, figure out what he's dealing with. And when he figures it out, then we'll see whether Albus Dumbledore is an ally or a chess player who thinks I'm a piece." The week that followed was the most productive of Harry's life, and that was saying something for someone who'd taught himself invisibility at age 9. Classes continued, and Harry approached them with a dual purpose: learning the structured system of wand magic, which, as McGonagall had suggested, gave him useful vocabulary and framework, while simultaneously pushing the boundaries of what he could do with his raw, intuitive abilities. In Transfiguration, he mastered every exercise McGonagall set, and then spent extra time studying how her techniques worked. The precise manipulation of magical energy, the mental architecture required to reshape matter, the safeguards built into the system to prevent catastrophic failure. It was, he realized, engineering. Wand magic was magical engineering, and like all engineering, it had rules, tolerances, and failure modes. Understanding those rules didn't limit him, it gave him precision tools to complement his raw power. McGonagall noticed. She started giving him extra work, not busy work but genuine challenges, advanced exercises that she pulled from NEWT, level textbooks with a look that dared him to struggle. He didn't, but the exercises taught him things, and he told her so, and the warmth in her stern face grew by increments. In Charms, Flitwick made good on his offer of advanced instruction. Harry started visiting his office twice a week for sessions that were half lesson, half collaborative exploration. Flitwick was a genius, there was no other word for it, and his understanding of charm mechanics was so deep and so nuanced that even Harry learned things he hadn't intuited. "The key insight," Flitwick said one evening, standing on his desk with a levitating teacup orbiting his head, "is that every charm has a relationship with the caster, not just an instruction. A relationship. The magic responds to your intent, your emotion, your understanding. A levitation charm cast in anger will be jerkier than one cast in calm. A cheering charm cast by someone who is genuinely happy will be more potent than one cast by someone going through the motions. Because magic is alive," Harry said. Flitwick's eyes twinkled. "Precisely, or at least it behaves as though it is. Whether magic is truly a conscious force or simply a natural phenomenon that responds to consciousness is a question that has occupied magical theorists for centuries." He paused. "I suspect you may have insights on that question that the rest of us lack." Harry smiled but said nothing. Some truths weren't his to share yet, Potions remained difficult, but not because of the subject matter. Harry was developing a genuine interest in potion making. It was the one magical discipline that didn't rely primarily on channeling power through a wand, instead using the inherent magical properties of ingredients, combined with precise technique, to achieve effects. It was chemistry, essentially, with a magical dimension. Snape was the problem. The man couldn't seem to decide whether to hate Harry or ignore him, so he alternated between the two with whiplash-inducing frequency. One class he'd stalk past Harry's cauldron without a word. The next he'd hover like a vulture, searching for faults, finding none, and growing more furious in their absence. He never praised Harry. He never deducted points either, which Ron said was basically the Snape equivalent of a standing ovation. But there were moments. Brief, unguarded flickers when Snape would look at Harry and the hatred would thin, and beneath it, Harry would see that same raw grief he'd glimpsed on the first day. The man was haunted, not by ghosts, by choices, by the life he hadn't lived, the woman he hadn't saved, the boy who wore her eyes and reminded him of everything he'd lost. Harry didn't push. He attended class, did his work, treated Snape with consistent, unflappable respect, and waited. Whatever Snape's story was, it would emerge in its own time. Harry's instinct at the crossroads told him that Severus Snape was important, a node in the web of futures, a pivot point where many paths converged. The flying lesson came on Thursday of their second week. Madam Hooch assembled them on the grounds, Gryffindors and Slytherins together, which guaranteed tension with 2 rows of battered school brooms laid out on the grass. The rules were simple. Command the broom to rise, mount it, hover, descend. Basic control. Harry looked at his broom and felt it respond to his presence. Not just the enchantments that animated it, the wood itself, the natural magic inherent in its grain and fibre, waking up and reaching toward him the way the plants in herbology did, the way the dogs in Little Whinging had. Up! Shouted 20 students. Harry's broom slammed into his hand before the word left his mouth. The force of it startled him, not the broom's eagerness but the voltage of the connection. The enchantments layered into this simple school broom were designed for minimal response, safety throttled, limited. In his hands they sang. Neville's broom twitched. He grabbed it nervously, mounted too early, and the broom, responding to his panic rather than his control, shot upward like a cork from a bottle. Neville screamed. 20 feet, 30, 40, his grip failed and he slid sideways, falling, hitting the grass with a crack that made everyone wince. Madam Hooch rushed over. Broken wrist. She gathered Neville up, warned everyone to stay on the ground, and hurried toward the hospital wing. The moment she was out of sight, Draco Malfoy bent down and picked something up from the grass. A small glass sphere full of red smoke, Neville's rememberall, a gift from his grandmother. "Look," Draco said, holding it up. "It's that stupid thing Longbottom's gran sent him." "Give it here, Malfoy," Harry said. He said it calmly, conversationally even. But something in his tone, or perhaps something in the air around him, made the nearest students take a step back. Draco looked at Harry, and the performance was back, the Malfoy script, the pure-blood sneer, the ingrained superiority that his father had beaten into him like a brand. But beneath it, Harry could see the cage around Draco's magic titan, the imposed patterns constraining the boy's true nature. "Come and get it, Potter," Draco said, and launched himself into the air on his broom. He was good. Harry had to give him that. Draco flew with the natural grace of someone who'd grown up on a broomstick, rising 50 feet in seconds, hovering with the rememberall clutched in his hand and a smirk on his pointed face. Harry mounted his broom. "Harry, no," Hermione hissed. Madam Hooch said. But Harry was already rising, and the moment his feet left the ground, he understood something fundamental about himself. He was born for this. Not broomstick flying specifically, the broom was a tool, a vehicle, almost irrelevant. What Harry was born for was this: the sky, the wind, the 3-dimensional freedom of unbound movement. The currents of magic in the air were different up here. Wilder, less constrained by stone and earth, flowing in great rivers that mapped the invisible topography of the sky. Harry could feel them all. He could ride them. He shot upward. Not with the careful control that Madam Hooch had described, rise slowly, keep steady, hover in place. He rocketed, the school broom screaming beneath him as his magic poured into its enchantments and overclocked them far beyond their design limitations. Wind tore at his robes. The ground fell away. The castle spread out below him like a toy, and above, the sky opened up, vast and blue and infinite. Harry laughed. He couldn't help it. For the first time in his life, his body was doing what his soul had always wanted, moving through the world with the speed and freedom that his magic demanded. He was a creature of crossroads, of thresholds of the spaces between, and the sky was the greatest space between there was. Draco was hovering 50 feet up, looking smug. Harry stopped in front of him, not even winded, and the expression on Draco's face shifted from smugness to something else as he registered the look in Harry's eyes. Not anger, not challenge, joy. Give me the remember-all, Draco. Or what? Harry tilted his head. The wind caught his hair and the sun was behind him, and in that moment, with magic pouring off him in waves that made the air shimmer, he looked like something out of myth. Not a boy on a broom. Something older, something that the sky itself recognized. Draco's hand opened. The remember-all dropped. Harry didn't think. He moved, tipping forward on the broom, diving, the ground rushing up at him like a fist. 60 feet, 50, 40. The remember-all tumbled through the air ahead of him, glinting in the sun. He reached out, plucked it from the air a foot above the grass, and pulled up so sharply that the broom's tail brushed the ground. He landed lightly. The watching students erupted in cheers. Draco descended slowly, and Harry expected anger, expected the humiliated fury of a boy who'd just been dramatically upstaged. What he got was different. Draco landed, walked over, and looked at Harry with those grey eyes, and the cage around his magic flickered. "You're not normal," Draco said quietly below the noise of the crowd. "No, the way you flew just now, that wasn't a first-time flyer, that wasn't even a good flyer, that was something else." "Yes," Draco stared at him. The sneer was gone, the script was gone. For a moment, the real Draco Malfoy, the curious, sharp, caged boy, looked out from behind his father's mask. "What are you, Potter?" "I'm figuring that out. You're welcome to watch." Draco opened his mouth, closed it, turned and walked away with his Slytherin entourage, and Harry watched him go and felt the crossroads bloom with possibilities. "Harry Potter." McGonagall was striding across the grounds with a face like a thundercloud, and for a moment Harry thought he'd actually managed to get himself in trouble. Her magic was crackling with agitation, her robes billowing behind her like a battle flag. "Never in all my years, Professor, I can explain. Come with me, now." She marched him into the castle, through corridors, past classrooms, and Harry followed with a mix of resignation and curiosity. She stopped at a classroom door and opened it. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick, could I borrow wood for a moment?" A burly fifth-year boy emerged, looking confused. McGonagall positioned him next to Harry and said, with the air of someone presenting a general with a new weapon, "Wood, I have found you a seeker." Oliver Wood's face underwent a transformation that Harry could only describe as religious ecstasy. "Are you serious, Professor? Mr. Potter has just performed a 50-foot dive to catch an object the size of a walnut on a school broom during his first time in the air. He is a natural, the best I have ever seen." She turned to Harry. "You will train with the Gryffindor Quidditch team, Mr. Potter, 3 times a week." "If you do not, I shall be very disappointed." "Professor," Harry said carefully, "I thought first years weren't allowed their own brooms." "I will speak with Professor Dumbledore about making an exception. I have not won the Quidditch Cup in 7 years, Mr. Potter, and I do not intend to make it 8. The fierceness in her voice was so at odds with her usual severity that Harry almost laughed. Minerva McGonagall, it turned out, was competitive to a degree that bordered on pathological. "I'd be happy to play, Professor." "Excellent. Would take him." "Explain the rules. I expect results." She swept away, and Wood immediately launched into an explanation of Quidditch that was so passionate, so detailed, and so intense that Harry began to suspect the 5th year dreamed about it. "This is incredible," Wood said, pacing back and forth in the now empty classroom. "We haven't had a decent seeker since Charlie Weasley, and Charlie could have played for England if he hadn't gone off to do dragons. You're built for it, small, light, fast. When can you start training?" "Whenever you need me." "Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. it is." Wood shook his hand with both of his own, beaming like a man who'd found religion, and Harry returned to the Gryffindor common room to find Ron waiting with barely contained excitement. "Fred and George told me. You made the team, the Quidditch team." "You're a first year. First years never make the team," Apparently I'm an exception. You're an exception to everything, mate. Ron was practically bouncing. This is incredible. Do you even know what a seeker does? Wood is explaining it to me tomorrow at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. on a Saturday. Ron's excitement dimmed considerably. Well, better you than me. Hermione appeared from behind a stack of homework with an expression that suggested she considered Quidditch a frivolous distraction from academics. Don't you think you should be focusing on your studies? It's only the second week and you're already taking on extracurricular commitments. Hermione, Ron said. It's Quidditch. Quidditch, it's the most important thing in the wizarding world. That's categorically untrue. Name one thing more important. Education, magical theory. Understanding the ancient origins of magic as practiced through the Hecatian tradition. I rest my case. Nobody cares about that stuff. I care about that stuff. My point exactly. They bickered their way through the evening, and Harry sat between them in the common room, working through his potions essay with half his mind while the other half tracked the subtle currents of magic flowing through Hogwarts. Something had shifted since his conversation with Hecate that morning. The castle's magic was more responsive to him, more attuned, as though his communion with the divine had deepened his connection to the ley lines beneath the school. He could feel everything now. Every student, every teacher, every ghost and portrait and suit of armor. He could feel Dumbledore in his tower, a mountain of controlled power, reading something that radiated old, complicated magic. He could feel Snape in his dungeon office, brewing something that smelled of bitterness and regret. He could feel Quirrell in his quarters, and the dark parasite on the back of his skull, restless and hungry, probing the castle's defences with shadowy tendrils that recoiled every time they brushed the wards. And far below, in the chamber at the crossroads, the seed of Hecate's power pulsed like a second heartbeat, ancient and patient and warm. Harry finished his essay, said goodnight to Ron and Hermione, and went to bed. In his dreams, he stood at a crossroads under a sky full of stars. 3 paths led away from where he stood, each lit by a different light, one gold, one silver, one the deep, soft dark of a moonless night. On each path a figure waited. He couldn't see their faces, but he could feel them. One warm and fierce and human, his mother, Lily, her love blazing like a torch even in death. One vast and ancient and divine, Hecate, watching from the spaces between worlds, and one dark, cold, hungry and brilliant, Voldemort. The broken thing that had tried to kill him and failed and would try again, was already trying, creeping through the shadows of a castle that should have been safe. 3 paths, 3 forces, and Harry at the centre at the crossroads where they met. He woke before dawn. 5 am. Quidditch practice. Oliver Wood was already on the pitch, setting up equipment in the grey pre-dawn light with the manic energy of someone who'd been awake for hours and couldn't understand why everyone else wasn't. He had a trunk full of enchanted balls and a broomstick that made the school brooms look like toys. Right, he said. Basics. Quidditch has 7 players, 3 chasers, 2 beaters, 1 keeper, that's me, and 1 seeker, that's you. The chasers score goals with the quaffle. The beaters protect the team with the bludgers. The keeper guards the hoops, and the seeker. He opened the trunk and released a tiny golden ball that immediately sprouted wings and vanished into the morning air. The seeker catches the snitch, 150 points, ends the game. Everything depends on you. Harry tracked the snitch with his deeper sight. It blazed like a tiny star, moving at incredible speed, changing direction with a randomness that was almost chaotic. Almost. Harry could see patterns in its movement. The enchantments that governed it followed rules, and rules created patterns, and patterns could be predicted. Mount up, Wood said. Let's see what you can do. What Harry could do was transcendent. He caught the snitch 7 times in 30 minutes. The first catch took 4 minutes. He was learning the broom, feeling out its responses, calibrating his movements. The second took 2 minutes. The third took 45 seconds. By the 7th, he was catching it almost lazily, plucking it from the air with an ease that made Wood's jaw drop progressively lower until it was in danger of hitting the grass. You're not real, Wood said faintly. You can't be real. Nobody flies like that. Is it enough? Enough. Harry, if you fly like that in a match, we won't just win. We'll make history. Harry grinned. He was sweating, exhilarated, alive in a way that only flying seemed to produce. The sky was his element. Up there, with the wind in his face and the magic of the air flowing through him, he was complete. Same time next week, he asked. Every day, Wood said fervently. Every single day. The weekend dissolved into a rhythm of study, practice, and exploration. Harry split his time between the room of requirement, where Hermione was building an increasingly complex understanding of the Hecatian tradition, the Quidditch pitch, where Wood was designing strategies around Harry's absurd abilities, and the chamber beneath Hogwarts, where Harry pushed deeper into his divine heritage, testing the limits of his power, learning to shape the raw magic of the ley lines with precision and intent. His classwork continued to be flawless, which was almost an afterthought. The structured magic taught at Hogwarts was a subset of what he could access, useful, informative, but ultimately limited. It was like a concert pianist being asked to practice scales. He did it because it built fundamentals, but the real music was happening elsewhere. By the end of September, Harry had quietly become the most powerful magical practitioner in Hogwarts. Not the most knowledgeable, Dumbledore's century of accumulated wisdom dwarfed Harry's 11 years. Not the most skilled, McGonagall's transfiguration and Flitwick's charms were masterworks of technique that Harry hadn't yet matched. But in terms of raw magical power, depth of connection to the source, and the ability to simply do things that shouldn't have been possible, Harry was in a category of one. He didn't advertise this. Not because he was hiding. He'd resolved from the beginning never to diminish himself, never to play small for other people's comfort. But there was a difference between hiding and simply not making a spectacle. Harry performed at the top of every class, answered every question, completed every assignment with excellence. If anyone wanted to test him, he'd respond without hesitation or restraint. But he didn't seek confrontation. Confrontation, however, sought him. It was a Tuesday evening in early October when Harry felt it. He was in the room of requirement with Ron and Hermione, reviewing Ron's strategic analysis of the castle's security arrangements. Ron had taken to his role with surprising intensity, mapping patrol routes, ward boundaries, and the movement patterns of key figures with the methodical precision of a military planner, a ripple in the castle's magic. Subtle, carefully masked, but unmistakable to Harry's senses. Someone was probing the protections on the third-floor corridor, testing them, looking for weaknesses. He's making a move, Harry said, cutting across Hermione's explanation of ancient Greek ward theory. Ron looked up from his maps. Quirrell. The thing inside Quirrell, it's testing the wards on the third floor, carefully. It doesn't want to trigger the alarms. Can Dumbledore feel it? Hermione asked. Harry extended his awareness toward the headmaster's tower. Dumbledore was there, his magic calm, steady, apparently undisturbed. Either he couldn't feel the probing or he was allowing it. I'm not sure. Either way, Voldemort won't get through tonight. The protections are too strong for what he currently is, but he's learning. Each probe teaches him something about the defenses. So he's mapping them, Ron said, and his voice had the flat, focused quality of a strategist working. Just like I'm mapping the castle, he's patient, he's planning. Yes, how long does he have? Before the probes tell him enough to get through, Harry considered. The protections on the third floor were multi-layered, he'd felt them from the first night, a complex sequence of challenges and safeguards, each designed by a different hand. Dumbledore's, McGonagall's, Flitwick's, Snape's, others he couldn't identify. Together they formed a gauntlet that would take significant power and knowledge to breach. Months, Harry said. Maybe until the end of the school year. He'll need Quirrell at full capacity and the parasite is draining him. Then we have time, Hermione said. We have time, but we need to use it. Ron spread his maps across the table. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. The third-floor corridor has 6 distinct magical signatures, 6 separate protections, one after another. Each one requires a different skill to bypass. It's a gauntlet. That's clever, Hermione murmured. No single person could get through all of them. You'd need a team with diverse abilities. Or, Ron said, looking at Harry, one person who can do everything. It's not just about power, Harry said. Some of those protections feel like puzzles. Logic problems, knowledge tests. Whoever designed this gauntlet wasn't just trying to stop a break-in. They were testing whether the person trying to get through deserved to reach what's at the end. Dumbledore designed it for you, Hermione said quietly. Harry met her eyes. She looked back steadily. Think about it, she continued. He puts an incredibly powerful magical artifact in a school full of children. protected by a series of challenges that require exactly the skills an exceptional young wizard would develop over the course of a school year. He announces at the feast that the corridor is forbidden, guaranteeing that every curious student in the castle will want to know what's there. And he specifically arranged for you, the boy who lived, the target of the Dark Lord who's possessing one of his teachers, to attend this school at this time. That's mental, Ron said. Why would Dumbledore set up a test like that? Harry's 11. Because Dumbledore doesn't know what Harry is, Hermione said. He suspects something. He knows Harry survived the killing curse, which is impossible. He knows Harry's been living with Muggles for 10 years, developing who knows what abilities. He needs to understand what he's dealing with. So he creates a controlled scenario, a dangerous but ultimately survivable series of challenges, and waits to see what Harry does. Ron turned to Harry. Is she right? Harry thought about it. The crossroads in his mind bloomed with futures, and in almost everyone he eventually went through that corridor. Not because he was manipulated into it, because whatever was at the end was connected to him, to his heritage, to the larger conflict with Voldemort. It was a convergence point, a crossroads where multiple paths met. Dumbledore was many things. Manipulative, certainly. Brilliant, undoubtedly, but also in his own complicated way trying to do the right thing. He'd placed Harry with the Dursleys, a terrible decision, but one that had served a protective purpose. Harry could now see through the ley lines. Lily's sacrificial protection was anchored to blood relatives, and Petunia's grudging roof had kept that anchor active. Dumbledore hadn't been careless. He'd been calculated. She's right, Harry said. Dumbledore's testing me, but he's also protecting me, and he's protecting the stone. The stone, Ron and Hermione said together. The Philosopher's Stone, Nicholas Flamel's creation, it produces the elixir of life, immortality. That's what Hagrid retrieved from Gringotts. That's what's hidden on the 3rd floor, and that's what Voldemort wants. Hermione's eyes went wide. The Philosopher's Stone is real. It's real, and it's directly connected to the ancient Greek magical tradition. Flamel didn't just invent alchemy, he rediscovered a branch of divine magic that deals with the fundamental transformation of matter and spirit. The stone is a divine artifact, Hermione. It belongs to the world I come from, not the world of wand magic. Bloody hell, Ron whispered. Yeah. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it settling around them like snow. So, Ron said eventually, with the careful tone of someone who's just realized the game is much bigger than he thought. Just to make sure I've got this straight, there's a divine artifact hidden in the basement. A dead Dark Lord is possessing a teacher and trying to steal it. The headmaster is running some kind of long-term test on you. You're half-goddess, and we're 3 first-years who are apparently the only ones with the full picture. That about sums it up. Brilliant, Ron cracked his knuckles. So let's figure out how to win. Harry looked at his friends, Ron with his maps and his strategy and his unshakable nerve, Hermione with her books and her brilliance and her fierce determination, and felt the future crystallize. Not a single path, not a predetermined destiny, but a choice. His choice made freely at the crossroads where everything converged. He chose them. He chose to fight. He chose to be exactly what he was, neither more nor less, and to meet whatever came with open eyes and steady hands. The crossroads stretched before him, and all 3 paths were lit. Let's begin, Harry said. Chapter 3. What sleeps beneath stone October came to Hogwarts like a cold hand closing around the castle. The grounds turned amber and rust, the forbidden forest became a wall of dark gold against grey skies, and the Black Lake took on a steely sheen that reflected clouds like a tarnished mirror. Inside, the castle compensated. Fires roared higher in every hearth. The enchanted ceiling in the great hall produced spectacular sunsets even on overcast days, and the house elves began producing soups and stews that could warm you from the inside out. Harry barely noticed the season changing. He was too busy learning how to be what he was. The room of requirement had become their war room, their library, their sanctuary. It shifted to meet their needs with an eagerness that Harry found almost touching. The castle wanted to help him, wanted to provide, and the room was its most direct expression of that desire. Some evenings it was a cozy study with armchairs and a fire. Other times it was a vast practice space with reinforced walls and targeting dummies. Once, when Hermione had requested research materials on the intersection of Greek and Norse magical traditions, it had produced an entire wing of bookshelves that she'd stared at with an expression bordering on religious ecstasy. Ron's strategic map of Hogwarts now covered an entire wall. He'd charted patrol routes, ward boundaries, the movement patterns of every teacher, the timing of Filch's rounds, and, most importantly, the activity around the third-floor corridor. Using a combination of Harry's magical sensing and his own patient observation, he'd built a picture of the castle's security that was probably more comprehensive than anything the staff possessed. Quirrell goes to the third floor every Thursday night, Ron said one evening, tapping a red pin on his map. Between 11 and midnight, he stays for about 20 minutes, then goes back to his quarters. The parasitic probe, the Voldemort thing, reaches out toward the protections each time, tests them and pulls back. He's learning the pattern of the wards, Harry confirmed. Each week he gets a little further. He's mapped the first 2 layers of protection already. How many layers are there? 6 that I can feel. Maybe 7, there's something at the very end that I can't quite read. It's muffled, like it's behind thick glass. That'll be Dumbledore's contribution, Hermione said without looking up from her book. He wouldn't make his own protection readable to anyone else, not even someone with your abilities. She was probably right. Dumbledore's magic had a quality that Harry had come to recognize. A deliberate opacity, like looking at a mountain through fog. You knew it was there, knew it was enormous, but the details were obscured. Whether this was natural or intentional, Harry couldn't tell. Probably both. What about the Cerberus? Ron asked. Harry blinked. The what? The 3-headed dog. Behind the door on the 3rd floor, Fred and George told me they tried to get through the locked door last year on a dare and nearly got their heads bitten off. Massive thing, 3 heads, absolutely mental. Harry reached out with his senses toward the 3rd floor corridor. Past the locked door, past the warning wards, there was indeed a living magical signature, enormous, fierce, and distinctly canine. 3-headed, a Cerberus, a creature from Greek mythology guarding a threshold. That's not a coincidence, Harry said slowly. What isn't? A Cerberus, a creature sacred to Greek mythology, specifically associated with guarding the boundary between the living world and the underworld, is the first line of defense protecting an artifact from the Greek magical tradition. Someone chose that creature deliberately. Hermione's head came up. Hagrid brought you to get your school supplies. Hagrid retrieved the stone from Gringotts, and Hagrid loves magical creatures. What if he provided the Cerberus? Hagrid has a 3-headed dog, Ron said flatly. Of course he does. Why wouldn't he? I need to talk to Hagrid, Harry said. They went the next afternoon. Hagrid's hut sat at the edge of the forbidden forest like a boulder that had rolled downhill and decided to stay. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the pumpkin patch beside the door was producing specimens that could have housed a family of 4. A crossbow leaned against the doorframe, and something inside was making a sound that was either a very large dog or a very small earthquake. Harry knocked. The door opened, and Hagrid's beaming face appeared, followed by the enthusiastic assault of an enormous boarhound named Fang, who immediately tried to lick Harry into submission. Harry, Ron, Hermione, come in, just making tea, mind the... Something crashed inside. Never mind. Sit down. The hut was one room, cluttered and warm, with hams and pheasants hanging from the ceiling and a fire crackling in a grate large enough to roast an ox. Hagrid bustled around making tea with hands that could have palmed a basketball, and Fang settled at Harry's feet with a contented groan, his massive head on Harry's shoes. How are ye finding Hogwarts? Hagrid asked, setting out mugs the size of small buckets and a plate of rock cakes that lived up to their name. Settlin' in all right. It's wonderful, Harry said honestly. Hagrid, I wanted to ask you something. Fire away. The 3-headed dog on the 3rd floor, is it yours? Hagrid's mug stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes darted between the 3 of them with the guilty panic of someone who was constitutionally incapable of keeping secrets and knew it. How do ye know about Fluffy? Fluffy, Ron choked on his rock cake. He's just a puppy, really. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. Listen, forget about Fluffy. What he's guarding is strictly between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. He stopped. His face crumpled with the realization of what he'd just said. I shouldn't have said that, he muttered. I should not have said that. It's all right, Hagrid, Harry said gently. We already know about the Philosopher's Stone. Hagrid went pale. How? Who told ye? Nobody told us. We figured it out. Harry leaned forward. Hagrid, the stone isn't safe. There's someone in the castle trying to steal it. No one's gonna steal it. Dumbledore's protections are being tested. Every Thursday night between 11 and midnight, the person doing it is getting closer each week. Hagrid set his mug down with a thunk. His small eyes were wide. Ye can't know that. How could ye possibly know that? Because I can feel it. I can feel the magic in the castle, Hagrid, all of it. I felt it from the moment I walked through the doors, and something is wrong. The big man stared at him. Harry saw the struggle on his face, the desire to dismiss, to trust in Dumbledore's infallibility, warring with the growing realization that the boy sitting across from him was not a normal student. Dumbledore knows, Hagrid said finally. Whatever's happening, Dumbledore knows. He always knows. Maybe, but does he know everything? Does he know about the Greek chappie you bought Fluffy from, a Greek creature guarding a Greek artifact? That's not a coincidence, Hagrid. What are ye saying? I'm saying that whoever sold you Fluffy might have known exactly what the dog would end up guarding, and they might have known how to get past it. Hagrid's face went through several colours. The chappie in the pub, he was interested in Fluffy, asked a lot of questions. Wanted to know what kind of creatures I'd handled. Did he ask how to calm Fluffy down? Harry pressed gently. Well, yeah, he did. And I told him Fluffy's a pushover if ye know how. Just play him a bit of music and he'll go straight off to sleep. Hagrid's mouth snapped shut. Horror dawned across his broad face. I shouldn't have told him that. I shouldn't have told ye that. You told a stranger in a pub how to get past the first line of defence protecting the most powerful magical artifact in Britain, Hermione said, and her voice was kind but unflinching. Hagrid looked like he might cry. It's okay, Harry said. We're not going to let anything happen to the stone, but I need to ask you something else, and I need you to be honest with me. Anything, Harry. The Greek chappie, what did he look like? Was he wearing a turban? Long pause. He had a hood on, kept his face covered, but now ye mention it. Hagrid trailed off, his eyes distant, remembering. He smelled funny, like garlic, lots of garlic. Ron and Hermione looked at Harry. Harry looked at the fire, Quirrell. It had been Quirrell, or rather Voldemort, using Quirrell to extract information. The Dark Lord had been planning this for longer than anyone realized. He'd identified the dog, learned its weakness, and set things in motion before the school year even began. Patient, methodical, intelligent. Hagrid, Harry said, I need you to trust me. There are things happening at Hogwarts that Dumbledore may not fully understand. I'm going to handle them, but I need allies, and you're the most trustworthy person I know. Hagrid's eyes welled up. He pulled out his tablecloth-sized handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. You're just like your mum, he said thickly. She always saw right through people too, kind but sharp as a tack. Will you help me? Anything, Harry, anything ye need. Keep your eyes open. If anything strange happens, anything at all, send me an owl. And Hagrid? Yeah, don't tell Dumbledore we had this conversation. Hagrid's face went through another cycle of colours. Keeping secrets from Dumbledore was, for Hagrid, roughly equivalent to lying to God. I trust Dumbledore with my life, he said. I know you do, and I'm not asking you not to, I'm asking you to trust me too. Can you do that? The big man looked at Harry, really looked, past the scar, past the fame, past the echo of Lily's eyes, and saw what was beneath. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I can do that. They left Hagrid's hut as the sun was setting, painting the grounds in shades of copper and shadow. The forbidden forest loomed to their right, dark and dense, and Harry felt it pulling at him, a subtle, persistent tug like the memory of a dream. What is it? Hermione asked, seeing him turn toward the trees, the forest. Something in there wants to talk to me. Something in the forbidden forest wants to talk to you, Ron said. The forest that's forbidden, the one with the word forbidden literally in its name. I know. Just checking. Are we going in? Harry looked at Ron, surprised. You'd come, mate. I'm not letting you walk into a forbidden forest full of God knows what by yourself. Hermione bit her lip. Her respect for rules warred visibly with her loyalty and curiosity. Curiosity won. It always would with Hermione. We stay together, she said firmly. And if anything tries to eat us, I'm blaming both of you. The forest swallowed them in 3 steps. One moment they were on the edge of the grounds, in the last copper light of sunset. The next, The trees had closed overhead like a canopy of dark hands, and the light was green-grey and dim, filtering through layers of ancient growth. The path, if you could call it that, was a narrow thread of packed earth winding between massive trunks, and the air smelled of loam, decay, and something older. Magic. The wild kind, untamed by wards or walls, flowing through the forest like blood through veins. Harry could see it all. The trees were alive with magic, not enchanted but genuinely, naturally magical. Their roots tapping into ley lines that ran beneath the forest floor, their branches reaching toward currents of power that flowed through the air like invisible rivers. Every plant, every fungus, every creature hidden in the undergrowth was part of a vast, interconnected magical ecosystem that dwarfed anything humans had built. This was what magic looked like before wizards got their hands on it. Wild, ancient, alive. It's beautiful, Harry said. It's terrifying, Ron countered. Different things. They walked deeper. Harry led, following the pull, and the forest seemed to part before him, branches lifting, roots smoothing, the path widening just enough for three abreast. The trees were welcoming him. The forest knew him, Hermione noticed. The vegetation is responding to you, like the plants in herbology, but more deliberate, as if the forest has a collective awareness. It does, or something close to it. The magical ecosystem here is so interconnected that it functions almost like a single organism. The trees share information through the ley lines, the way Muggle trees share nutrients through their root networks. Wood Wide Web, Hermione murmured, and Harry grinned at the reference. Exactly, but magical. Something moved in the darkness ahead, large, four-legged. Harry held up a hand and they stopped. A centaur emerged from between the trees. He was magnificent, pale gold from the waist up, deep chestnut from the waist down, with long white blonde hair and eyes that reflected the dim forest light like polished silver. His bow was slung across his back, and he moved with the fluid grace of something that belonged to the forest the way river belongs to its valley. He stopped 10 feet from them and studied Harry with those silver eyes. "The stars foretold your coming," the centaur said. His voice was deep, measured, carrying the particular gravity of someone who chose every word with care. "Though they disagreed on what you are, I'm Harry Potter. You are more than a name, child of the crossroads. I am Fiennes. The herd has been watching the castle since September, waiting for you to enter the forest. Waiting for me. Mars is bright tonight." Fiennes' silver eyes shifted to the canopy where glimpses of sky showed through the leaves. "It has been bright for weeks. War is coming. But that is not what brought us to watch. There is a new light in the heavens, not a star, not a planet. Something that has not been seen in the sky above this forest for 3,000 years. Harry felt the crossroads stir within him. What kind of light? The light of a crossroads. The light of the triple goddess. The light of divine blood walking the earth in mortal form. Fiennes lowered his gaze from the sky to Harry's face. "You are Hecate's son." It wasn't a question. Ron made a small, strangled noise behind Harry. Hermione gripped his arm. "How do you know that?" Harry asked. "Centaurs read the stars, child. We have read them since before your kind built castles and called it civilization. The birth of a divine child is written in the constellations as clearly as words on a page." Fiennes stepped closer. "The herd is divided. Some believe your coming heralds a new age. Others believe it heralds destruction. Bane, our leader, has forbidden contact with you. And yet here you are. I am here because I believe in what the stars say, and the stars say you are a crossroads unto yourself, a point where all paths converge. The choices you make will shape the world, not the wizarding world, the world." Harry absorbed this. The weight of it should have been crushing, but the crossroads inside him, the part of his nature that existed at the intersection of all possibilities, accepted it with a calm that felt like certainty. "Something is hunting in this forest," Fiennes said. "A dark thing, desperate and hungry. It has been killing unicorns and drinking their blood." "What?" Hermione gasped. "Unicorn blood is a powerful substance. It will sustain a failing life, extend a dying existence. But it carries a curse. To slay something so innocent, so pure, is an act of such evil that the life you save becomes half-life, a shadowed, diminished thing." "Voldemort," Harry said. Fiennes inclined his head. "The shade of the Dark Lord is weakening. Its hold on its host is failing. It needs sustenance, and unicorn blood is the most accessible source of life-extending magic in the forest. How many unicorns?" 2 that we have found. There may be more." Cold anger settled in Harry's chest, not the hot, explosive kind, something deeper, steadier. The kind of anger that comes from something fundamental being violated. Unicorns were creatures of pure magic, embodiments of innocence and grace. They'd approached Harry without fear in the margins of the grounds, their silver forms ghosting through the morning mist, their presence a gentle benediction. To kill one for its blood was an obscenity. "Show me," Harry said. Fions led them deeper into the forest. Ron stuck close to Hermione, his wand out, his face pale but set. Hermione moved with the rigid determination of someone who was afraid but refused to let fear make decisions for her. They found the unicorn in a clearing. It was silver-white, lying on its side in a pool of blood that glowed faintly in the dark, casting an ethereal light across the forest floor. Its throat was torn. Its eyes were open, glassy, reflecting starlight that they would never see again. Harry knelt beside it. The magic was still there, fading, dimming, but present. The unicorn's life force draining slowly into the earth, carrying with it a purity that made Harry's heart ache. He could feel where the blood had been taken, feel the dark, hungry magic that had consumed it. Voldemort's signature. The oily, wrong frequency that lived in his scar. "Can you track it?" Ron asked quietly. "The thing that did this." Harry reached out with his senses, following the dark thread of Voldemort's magic through the forest. It twisted and turned, fading in places, strengthening in others, leading back toward the castle in a meandering path that suggested a creature moving furtively, avoiding the centaur's patrols. It came from the castle and returned to the castle. "Quirrell, he's bringing Voldemort here to feed." "How often?" Hermione asked. "Based on the decay, this unicorn was killed too, maybe 3 days ago. The first one, whenever it was, would have been earlier, maybe a week apart." "So he's on a schedule," Ron said, his strategist's mind clicking into gear. "He needs to feed regularly." "That's a vulnerability." Harry stood. He was still looking at the unicorn, and the cold anger in his chest had crystallized into something harder. "Resolution." "Fions," he said. "I'm going to stop this." "How?" "By being here when he comes back." The centaur studied him. Silver eyes, ancient and knowing, reading things in Harry's face that perhaps even Harry couldn't see. "The stars say many things about you, child of the crossroads. One thing they say most clearly: you do not make promises lightly." "No, I don't." "Then I will tell the herd. And when the dark thing comes hunting, we will drive it toward you." Harry held the centaur's gaze and felt something pass between them, not an alliance exactly, but a recognition. Two beings who stood apart from the human world, bound by something older than politics or house rivalries. "Thank you, Fions." The centaur inclined his head, turned and vanished into the trees with a silence that something his size had no right to possess. They left the forest in the dark, following the path that the trees made for Harry. No one spoke until they reached the edge of the grounds where the castle's lights cast warm squares of gold across the grass. "That was the worst thing I've ever seen," Ron said. His voice was flat, stripped of its usual warmth. "That unicorn." "I know," Harry said. "We're going to stop him." "We're going to stop him." Ron nodded once, sharp and decisive, and the three of them walked back to the castle. The next 2 weeks were preparation. Harry spent every available hour in the chamber beneath Hogwarts, pushing deeper into his connection with the ley lines, with Hecate's dormant power, with the raw magical force that was his birthright. He practiced shaping magic without wand or word, learning to create barriers, projectiles, bindings, combat magic, though he didn't think of it that way. He thought of it as learning to speak a language he'd always understood, but never spoken aloud. The divine magic responded to him with increasing fluency. Where once he'd felt the ley lines as external forces, rivers he could swim in, they now felt like extensions of himself, as natural as fingers and toes. He could reach through them, sense through them, even project his awareness along their paths to feel distant places and events. One night, experimenting in the chamber, he pushed his awareness along the ley lines all the way to London and felt the Ministry of Magic, a massive, bureaucratic knot of structured spellwork, humming with the magical equivalent of filing cabinets and rubber stamps. He pushed further and found Diagon Alley, Gringotts, the leaky cauldron. Further still, and he touched the edges of other magical communities, a school in France, bright and elegant, a castle in Scandinavia, dark and austere, Something vast and ancient in Egypt that made Hogwarts look like a garden shed. The world was full of magic. Full of it. And Harry was connected to all of it, because all of it flowed from the same source. Hermione, meanwhile, had become a one-woman research department. The room of requirement fed her books faster than she could read them, which was saying something, and she'd constructed a theoretical framework for Harry's abilities that was genuinely impressive. The Hecatian tradition identifies 3 aspects of divine magic. She told them one evening, her notes spread across a table large enough to seat 20. Corresponding to Hecate's 3 faces, the first is Propylaea, the gatekeeper. This is the power over thresholds, boundaries, and transitions. It's why you can sense wards, feel the barrier between worlds, and navigate crossroads. The door thing, Ron said. He can open anything. Essentially, yes. The second aspect is Phosphoros, the light bearer. This is the power over magic itself, the ability to see, shape, and direct the raw force that underlies all spellwork. It's the source of your wandless abilities, your ability to see magical signatures, everything. The glowy thing, if you must. The third aspect is Chthoniya, the earthly one. This is the power over life, death, and the spaces between, communication with the dead, command over creatures of the night, the ability to pass between worlds. The creepy thing. Ron, am I wrong? You're reductive. But am I wrong? Hermione sighed. No, you're not wrong. The third aspect is, by far, the most dangerous and the least understood. The texts warn that Chthoniya magic can blur the boundary between life and death, and that excessive use can attract the attention of entities from the other side. Harry thought about this. The third aspect resonated with something he'd felt but hadn't explored, a darkness at the edge of his power, not evil but deep, like the bottom of a very dark lake. He could feel the dead sometimes, faintly, like echoes in a long corridor. Hogwarts was full of ghosts, and they looked at him differently than they looked at other students. Nearly headless Nick had started following him at a respectful distance, as though drawn by a gravity he couldn't resist. There's more, Hermione said, and her voice dropped. The texts mention a fourth aspect, unnamed, undocumented, referenced only in fragments, something that combines all 3, a power that only manifests in the children of Hecate, never in mortal practitioners. The texts call it the crossroads made flesh. What does that mean? I don't know. The relevant passages were destroyed or redacted. Someone went through these books and specifically removed any detailed description of the fourth aspect. Hermione's jaw tightened. Someone didn't want this information known. The Ministry, Harry said. That would be my guess. The British magical government has a long history of suppressing knowledge about divine magic and the old traditions. There are references in the historical texts to a great revision in the 17th century, a systematic destruction of ancient magical knowledge, coinciding with the establishment of the Statute of Secrecy. They didn't just hide the wizarding world from muggles, Harry said slowly. They hid the old magic from wizards. Yes, and they've been maintaining that suppression for 300 years, Ron whistled. So the whole system, the ministry, the schools, the wand-based magic, it's all built on top of something older that they deliberately buried. That's what the evidence suggests. Blimey, and they call me thick. Ron's maps had grown more detailed, incorporating everything they'd learned from Hagrid and Fiennes. He'd identified Quirrell's patterns, tracked Snape's suspicious nighttime movements. He's following Quirrell. I think he suspects something, and mapped the likely schedule of Voldemort's unicorn hunts. Based on the 2 kills we know about and the rate of magical decay Harry detected, Ron said, pointing to a timeline he'd drawn along one edge of the map. Voldemort needs to feed approximately every 10 days. The last kill was 12 days ago. He's due. Tonight, Harry asked. Ron checked his calculations. Tonight or tomorrow night. If I were him, I'd go tonight. It's a Thursday, his usual pattern, and the moon's dark, which means less visibility for the centaurs. Then tonight we end it, Harry. Hermione's voice was careful. If you confront Voldemort in the forest, even a weakened, parasitic version, the school will find out. Dumbledore will find out. Everything we've kept quiet will be exposed. I know. Are you ready for that? Harry thought about the unicorn in the clearing. It's silver blood. It's open, empty eyes. I'm not going to let another unicorn die because I'm worried about keeping secrets. Hermione nodded. She'd expected that answer. She agreed with it. Then we plan it properly. Ron spread a fresh sheet of parchment and started drawing. Right, here's the forest, here's where we found the unicorn. The centaurs said they'd drive the hunter toward Harry, which means we need a position that's central enough to intercept but far enough from the castle that the fight won't be detected immediately. This clearing here, he tapped the map, is about a mile in, on a ley line intersection. It gives Harry maximum power and us maximum cover. Us, Harry raised an eyebrow. We're coming, Ron said flatly. Non-negotiable. Ron, none, negotiable. Harry looked at Hermione. Don't look at me like that, she said. I've been researching divine combat magic for 2 weeks. I'm not missing the practical demonstration. Something warm and fierce expanded in Harry's chest. These two, these impossible, brave, ridiculous people. Fine, but you stay back, both of you. If things go wrong, we improvise, Ron said. That's what strategy is. Planning for when the plan goes to hell. Harry couldn't argue with that. They left the castle at 11 p.m. through a passage that Harry had discovered in his explorations, a hidden tunnel behind a tapestry on the 4th floor that emerged in a hollow near the edge of the forest. The night was moonless, as Ron had predicted, and the grounds were dark and still. Harry led, his senses extended, feeling the castle's magic thin as they moved away from the walls and the forest's wild magic thicken around them. The trees swallowed them. Harry wove light around them, not visible light, but a warmth that kept the forest's less friendly inhabitants at bay. Things moved in the darkness, watching, but nothing approached. The forest recognized him. They reached the clearing in 20 minutes. It was perfect, a natural amphitheatre of ancient oaks, centered on a point where 2 ley lines crossed. Harry could feel the power here, raw and available, humming beneath the carpet of dead leaves. Ron, Hermione, those trees. Harry pointed to a pair of massive oaks at the clearing's edge, their trunks wide enough to hide behind. Stay there. Shield charms if anything comes at you, otherwise don't move. And if you need help, Hermione asked. I won't. It wasn't arrogance. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a calm that came from somewhere deeper than confidence. Harry knew what he was. He knew what Voldemort's shade was. The gap between them was the gap between the ocean and a puddle. Ron and Hermione took their positions. Harry stood at the centre of the clearing, at the intersection of the ley lines, and waited. An hour passed. The forest was quiet, too quiet, the natural sounds of night suppressed by something that moved through the trees with predatory intent. Harry felt it coming long before he heard it. A dark signature, oily and wrong, the same frequency as his scar. It was moving through the forest in a zigzag pattern, driven by the centaurs, herded toward the clearing. And ahead of it, running, a unicorn. Harry's heart clenched. The unicorn burst into the clearing, a mare, young, silver-white, her flanks heaving with exertion and terror. She saw Harry and shied, then stopped, nostrils flaring, dark eyes wide. She was afraid. But something in Harry's presence, the divine magic in his blood, the echo of the goddess who created her kind, calmed her enough to stand still. It's okay, Harry said softly. You're safe. Nothing is going to hurt you. The unicorn's ears swiveled toward him. She took one trembling step forward, then another. Then she was close enough for Harry to touch, and he placed his hand on her muzzle, and the golden light in his blood flowed through the contact, wrapping around her like a shield. The thing came out of the trees. It had been human once. Quirrell's body, thin and hunched, draped in a dark cloak that billowed despite the absence of wind. The turban was gone. In the dim starlight, Harry could see the back of Quirrell's head, and what was there made Ron stifle a gasp from behind his oak. A face. Chalk-white, flat-nosed, with eyes like red embers pressed into dough. Voldemort's face, growing out of the back of Quirrell's skull like a parasitic twin, lipless mouth twisted in a snarl of hunger. The thing moved toward the unicorn with jerky, puppeted movements. Quirrell's body was failing. Harry could see it in the degradation of the man's magical signature, the way his life force guttered like a candle in a draught. Voldemort was burning through his host, consuming him from the inside, and the unicorn blood was the only thing keeping both of them functional. That's enough, Harry said, his voice carried across the clearing with a clarity that had nothing to do with volume. The shining threads in the air responded to his intent, amplifying, projecting, filling the space with a resonance that vibrated in every living thing within earshot. Quirrell's body stopped. The face on the back of his head rotated slowly toward Harry. Those red eyes found him, and Harry felt the dark magic surge, recognition, fury, hunger, and beneath it all, a cold, calculating intelligence that was far more dangerous than the hunger. "Harry Potter," said the face. The voice was a whisper, papery and dry, like dead leaves scraping across stone. "I wondered when you would stop hiding." "I wasn't hiding, I was waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to do something I couldn't ignore." The red eyes narrowed. Voldemort's magical signature shifted, probing, trying to read Harry the way he read everyone. Through the dark arts, through legilimency, through the parasitic magic that had made him the most feared wizard of his age, the probe hit Harry's mind and disintegrated. Not deflected, not blocked. Unmade, the dark magic touched the divine light in Harry's consciousness and simply ceased to exist, like a shadow touching the sun. Voldemort recoiled. The face on the back of Quirrell's head contorted with something Harry had never expected to see there, confusion. "What are you?" The lipless mouth whispered. Harry stepped forward. The ley lines beneath his feet responded, power surging upward through the earth, and the air around him began to shimmer with golden light that had nothing to do with torches or stars. The unicorn behind him whinnied softly and pressed her muzzle against his back. "I'm the thing your curse couldn't kill," Harry said. "Do you want to know why?" The red eyes blazed. Voldemort's fragment didn't answer in words, it attacked. Dark magic erupted from Quirrell's hands, a torrent of killing intent shaped into a concentrated blast that would have vaporized a normal wizard. It was crude. Voldemort's power, channeled through a dying host, was a fraction of what it had been, but it was vicious, aimed to kill. Harry raised his hand. The dark magic struck something invisible a foot from his palm and detonated. Not a shield spell, not a protego, not any structured defensive magic. The divine light in Harry's blood simply existed between him and the attack broke against it like water against a cliff face. Dark energy scattered in all directions, scorching the trees, killing the grass, leaving a ring of devastation around the point of impact. Harry didn't move, didn't flinch. The golden light around him brightened. "Is that all?" he asked. Voldemort screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the shriek of something that existed outside the normal parameters of life and death, a rage so pure and so distilled that it carried its own kind of magic. Quirrell's body lunged forward, hands outstretched, dark magic crackling between his fingers. Harry caught his wrists. The contact was electric. Voldemort's dark magic met Harry's divine essence, and the reaction was instantaneous. Quirrell's skin began to burn where Harry touched it, blistering, cracking, golden light pouring from the wounds like sunlight through broken cloud. Quirrell screamed, his own voice this time, not Voldemort's, a howl of agony from a man who'd been puppeted for months and was now feeling the consequences. Harry didn't let go. He could feel Voldemort's parasitic tendrils wrapped around Quirrell's magic, his life force, his very soul. They were deep, horrifyingly deep, woven into the man's being like roots through soil. Pulling them out would hurt. It might kill Quirrell, but leaving them would definitely kill him. "This is going to hurt," Harry said, and he meant it for Quirrell, not Voldemort. "I'm sorry." He reached into Quirrell with his power, not physically but magically, diving past the surface, past the dark corruption, down to the place where Quirrell's own magic still flickered, diminished but alive. He found the parasitic tendrils and began to burn them away, one by one, with the precision of a surgeon and the power of a bonfire. Voldemort fought. God, he fought. The Dark Lord's fragment threw everything it had at Harry: curses, mental attacks, raw destructive force. Each assault broke against Harry's divine nature like a sparrow against a cathedral, and each failure drove Voldemort's rage higher. "You cannot. I am Lord Voldemort. I am the greatest sorcerer who ever—" "You're a parasite," Harry said quietly, still working, still burning away the tendrils. Feeding on a dying man, drinking unicorn blood, hiding on the back of someone's skull. You were a great wizard once, now you're this. The red eyes blazed with fury, and beneath the fury, for the first time, Harry saw fear. Voldemort's fragment tore itself free. It ripped out of Quirrell with a sound like tearing cloth, and the man collapsed to the ground unconscious, his back a mess of burned and blistered skin, but his magical signature already stronger without the parasite. He'd live. Probably. The fragment hung in the air, a dark, shapeless thing, a cloud of malevolent intention without a body to anchor it. It writhed, screamed, tried to flee. Harry reached out with the ley lines. Threads of golden power erupted from the ground, from the trees, from the air itself, converging on the dark fragment, wrapping around it, containing it. The fragment shrieked and fought, and Harry could feel its strength, diminished, yes, but still formidable, still slippery. It was trying to dissipate, to scatter itself into the magical currents and escape. But Harry was standing at a crossroads, and the crossroads were his domain. He pulled the threads tight. The fragment condensed, compressed, screaming at a frequency that made the trees shudder. For a moment, Harry had it contained, trapped, a dark pearl of concentrated evil held in a net of divine light. Then something happened that Harry didn't expect. The fragment split. A piece of it, the smallest sliver, barely more than a shadow, tore itself away and shot into the sky like a dark comet, faster than Harry could track, faster than the ley lines could follow. It vanished into the night, fleeing northward, and Harry felt it dwindle until it was beyond his range. But the larger piece remained in his net, thrashing, weakening. Harry studied it with his deeper sight, and what he saw confirmed what he'd suspected since his first day at Hogwarts. This wasn't all of Voldemort, it wasn't even most of him. It was a fragment of a fragment, a piece of soul, torn and tattered, attached to other pieces by dark threads that extended outward through dimensions Harry couldn't fully perceive. Voldemort hadn't just survived the night he'd attacked Harry's family. He'd prepared, split his soul, hidden pieces of it, created anchors that kept him tied to life even when his body was destroyed. Horcruxes. The word rose from somewhere deep in Harry's inherited knowledge. Not from Hecate, but from the magical theory Hermione had been teaching him, filtered through the ancient Greek understanding of soul magic. A Horcrux was an abomination, a container for a piece of soul, ripped free by the act of murder. It was the darkest magic imaginable, a violation of the fundamental laws governing life and death, and Voldemort had made more than one. Harry looked at the contained fragment and felt the future's branch. He could destroy it. The divine fire in his blood could unmake this piece of Voldemort's soul as easily as sunlight dispersed fog. But destroying it would tell him nothing, and he needed to understand what he was dealing with. He compressed the fragment further, smaller and smaller, until it was a marble-sized sphere of contained darkness. Then he reached into the earth, opened a space at the intersection of the ley lines, and placed the fragment there, warded by the divine magic of the crossroads itself. Nothing was getting in or out of that prison. Harry, he turned. Ron and Hermione were emerging from behind their oaks, faces pale, eyes wide. Hermione's wand was drawn but unneeded. Ron looked like he'd just watched someone arm wrestle a thunderstorm. "Is it over?" Ron asked. "The fight is." "The war isn't." Harry looked down at Quirrell's unconscious body. "He'll live, we need to get him to the hospital wing." "What about the thing, Voldemort's fragment? It's contained, buried at the crossroads, warded by the ley lines. It's not going anywhere. And the piece that escaped." Trust Ron to have noticed that, even in the chaos. Gone, back to whatever's sustaining Voldemort's main consciousness. He'll know what happened here, he'll know what I am, or at least he'll start to suspect. Is that a problem, Harry considered? Not yet. He's too weak to act directly, and his best agent just got burned out of his host. He'll retreat, regroup, try to understand what he's facing. That gives us time. Time for what? To find the other pieces, the other fragments of his soul. Hermione's sharp intake of breath told Harry she'd already connected the dots. Horcruxes, he made Horcruxes. Multiple, I could feel the threads connecting this fragment to others, at least 4 more, maybe 5, each one an anchor keeping him tied to life. So even if you destroy his body, he comes back, as long as the Horcruxes exist. Yes. Bloody hell, Ron whispered. That's why he survived that night. Your mum's sacrifice destroyed his body, but his soul was anchored. He couldn't die. Can't die. Not until every piece is found and destroyed. The enormity of it settled around them like a physical weight, not just a Dark Lord who'd made himself functionally immortal through the most evil magic conceivable. A Dark Lord who'd now had a direct encounter with Harry's divine power and would be desperately trying to understand it, counteract it, find a way around it. "Well," Ron said, with the steady pragmatism that was his greatest strength, "I suppose we'd better get started then." They levitated Quirrell's unconscious body out of the forest. Hermione handled the spell, precise and controlled, and were halfway across the grounds when a figure appeared out of the darkness ahead of them. Dumbledore. He stood in the moonless dark like a lighthouse, his silver beard and half-moon spectacles catching light that shouldn't have existed, his blue eyes sharp and wide awake and utterly devoid of their usual twinkle. He was wearing a magnificent dressing gown covered in shooting stars, and he looked at the unconscious professor floating between 3 first years with an expression that was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. "I think," Dumbledore said quietly, "that we should have a conversation." "Yes," Harry said. "I think we should." They brought Quirrell to the hospital wing, where Madame Pomfrey descended on him with the professional ferocity of a field medic. Dumbledore instructed Ron and Hermione to return to Gryffindor Tower, and for a moment Harry thought they'd argue. "Go," he said. "I'll tell you everything." Ron nodded. Hermione squeezed his hand once hard and they left. Harry followed Dumbledore through the castle in silence. The headmaster moved with the unhurried pace of someone who had all the time in the world, and Harry matched it, letting the silence build. They were taking each other's measure, these two, the old wizard and the young demigod, and both understood that what happened in the next hour would shape everything that followed. Dumbledore's office was behind a gargoyle on the 2nd floor. The password was Lemon Drop, which Harry filed away as either charmingly eccentric or deliberately disarming. The office itself was circular and cluttered, full of strange silver instruments that whirred and puffed, portraits of former headmasters pretending to sleep, and a magnificent scarlet bird perched on a golden stand. The bird was a phoenix. Harry knew it the moment he saw it. The magical signature was unmistakable: fire and rebirth, death and renewal, an endless cycle of destruction and creation contained in a single beautiful creature. The phoenix turned its head toward Harry, and its dark eyes held an intelligence that was ancient and fierce and deeply familiar. It sang. One note, pure and clear, that filled the office with warmth and resonated in Harry's chest like a bell. "Fawkes seems to like you," Dumbledore said, settling into the chair behind his desk. "He doesn't sing for many people." "He recognizes me," Harry said. "Phoenixes are creatures of the crossroads. They exist at the boundary between life and death. I imagine he can sense what I am." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose a fraction. He steepled his fingers and regarded Harry over them. "And what are you, Harry?" Harry sat in the chair opposite the headmaster's desk. He was 11 years old, small, thin, wearing school robes that were slightly too big for him, with untidy hair and a lightning scar and his mother's green eyes. He looked like a child. He didn't feel like one. "What do you already know?" Harry asked. "I know that Voldemort attempted to kill you as a baby and failed. I know that your mother's sacrifice created a protection that I've spent 10 years trying to understand. I know that your magical abilities exceed anything I've observed in a student, or indeed in most adults. And I know that you just extracted Voldemort's parasitic shade from Professor Quirrell in the Forbidden Forest, which suggests a command of magic that I would have thought impossible. You knew about Quirrell, I suspected. Professor Snape confirmed my suspicions several weeks ago. He's been monitoring Quirrell on my instructions. And you didn't act. I was waiting, a pause, for the right moment. You were waiting for me to act, Harry said, testing me. Dumbledore didn't deny it. His blue eyes held Harry's steadily. I have spent 10 years, Harry, trying to understand what happened the night your parents died. Your mother's sacrifice was powerful, but I have studied sacrificial magic extensively, and what happened to Voldemort's curse goes beyond what even the most powerful sacrifice should have achieved. A mother's love can create a protection. It cannot reflect a killing curse. Unless the child being protected is something more than human. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Harry had ever heard. Dumbledore's face didn't change. His hands didn't move. But his magic, his vast, controlled, carefully opaque magic, rippled. Just for a moment. A crack in the mountain, fog parting, revealing a glimpse of what lay beneath. Surprise. Real, genuine surprise, perhaps the first Albus Dumbledore had experienced in decades. More than human, he repeated. My mother performed a ritual before I was born. She reached across the barrier between worlds and called upon something divine, and it answered. Lily. Dumbledore's voice was barely a whisper. Lily performed a divine invocation. That magic has been lost for 300 years, since the Great Revision. Since the Ministry systematically destroyed all knowledge of the old magical traditions. Another ripple, larger this time. You know about the revision. I know a great deal, Professor. I know about Hecate. I know about the chamber beneath this castle. Her temple, built on the crossroads of the ley lines millennia before the founders laid their first stone. I know that Hogwarts was built here deliberately, on a site of divine power, and that the school's magic is fundamentally connected to something older and vaster than any of its founders realized. The chamber, Dumbledore stood. Actually stood, rising from his chair with an energy that belied his age. You found the chamber beneath Hogwarts. I have searched for that chamber for 50 years. I found references in texts so old they crumbled at a touch. I knew it was there, I could feel it faintly in the deepest dungeons. But I could never open the door. The door opens for Hecate's blood. I'm her son. The word landed like a stone in still water and the ripples spread outward. Dumbledore sank back into his chair. For a long moment he said nothing. His blue eyes were distant, calculating, reorganizing decades of assumptions around this new axis. Her son, he said. Hecate's son, the goddess of magic herself, and Lily. He closed his eyes. Lily, you brilliant, reckless, magnificent woman. When he opened his eyes again, the twinkle was gone. In its place was something rawer, respect, wariness, and a humility that Harry suspected few people had ever seen from Albus Dumbledore. I owe you an apology, Dumbledore said. For what? For the Dursleys. For 10 years in a cupboard. I knew your home life was difficult, Harry. I told myself the protection of your mother's sacrifice, anchored through her blood in Petunia's home, was worth the cost. I told myself I was keeping you safe. He paused. I was also keeping you contained. A child of unknown power, growing up in a controlled environment, I'm not proud of that reasoning. Harry studied the old man. The apology was real. The guilt was real. And the calculation was real too. Dumbledore was a man who did difficult things for complicated reasons, and he didn't pretend otherwise. I survived, Harry said. The Dursleys couldn't break what I am, but I appreciate the honesty, Professor. You deserve more than appreciation. You deserve the truth, as much of it as I have. Then tell me about the Philosopher's Stone, and tell me why you really brought it to Hogwarts. Dumbledore nodded slowly. The stone is Nicholas Flamel's creation, as you no doubt know. What is less commonly known is that Flamel didn't invent the principles of alchemy from scratch. He rediscovered them, from Greek sources, texts that survived the revision because they were hidden in France rather than Britain. The stone is, in essence, a piece of divine magical technology, translated into a form that mortals can create and use. It's connected to Hecate's tradition. It is the most direct connection to the divine magical tradition that exists in the modern world. When I learned that Voldemort was seeking it, I couldn't risk leaving it at Gringotts. His agents had already attempted one break-in. I brought it here where I could protect it, and where I could eventually reach it. Dumbledore's lips twitched, not quite a smile. I am an old man, Harry, and old men play long games. I didn't know what you were, but I knew you were extraordinary. I hoped that whatever happened, the stone would end up in the right hands, and if those hands had been Voldemort's, then the protections would have held. They were designed to be impassable by anyone who intended to use the stone for selfish purposes. Dumbledore's final protection, the one I can't read through the ley lines. Correct, the Mirror of Erised, an artifact that shows the deepest desire of anyone who looks into it. I modified it to release the stone only to someone who wanted to find it but not use it. Voldemort could never have passed that test. And you weren't sure I could either. Silence. Acknowledgement. I wasn't sure of anything about you, Harry. I'm still not. But I'm beginning to think that what I don't know about you is rather more important than what I do. Harry stood. Fawkes trilled softly from his perch, and Harry crossed the room to the phoenix and extended his hand. The bird stepped onto his arm without hesitation, its talons gentle, its weight surprisingly light. Warmth flowed between them, two creatures of the crossroads, one born of fire and rebirth, one born of divinity and mortal love. Professor, Harry said, stroking Fawkes's scarlet feathers. Voldemort made Horcruxes, multiple. That's how he survived. Dumbledore went very still. I felt them when I contained his fragment tonight, threads connecting to other pieces of his soul hidden in objects or locations around the world, at least 4, maybe more. As long as they exist, he can't be permanently destroyed. Horcruxes, Dumbledore breathed. I have theorized, for years I have theorized, but I couldn't confirm. You're certain? I held a piece of his soul in my hands tonight, Professor. I can feel the connections. I contained it beneath the crossroads in the forest, warded by divine magic. It's not going anywhere. Dumbledore stood again, pacing now, his magnificent brain visibly at work. If we can identify the vessels, locate them, destroy them one by one, Harry, this changes everything. The hunt for Voldemort's Horcruxes becomes the central objective. Not just defense, but offense, dismantling his immortality piece by piece. I agree, and I'll need help. Your knowledge, your connections, your understanding of Voldemort's history. I have the power to destroy Horcruxes, I can feel that, but I need information to find them. Dumbledore turned to him, and for the first time Harry saw the old wizard fully, not the twinkle, not the grandfatherly facade, not the chess player. The real Albus Dumbledore, brilliant, flawed, deeply committed to the fight against darkness and willing, finally, genuinely willing, to work with rather than around the extraordinary boy standing in his office. You have it, Dumbledore said. Whatever I know, whatever I can learn. We work together, as partners, not as teacher and student, not as chess player and piece. A beat. Dumbledore inclined his head. As partners. Harry extended his hand. Dumbledore took it. The handshake was brief, firm and binding in a way that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with trust. One more thing, Harry said, as Fawkes hopped from his arm back to his perch. The scar on my forehead, there's something in it. A fragment of dark magic contained by my mother's protection and my own nature. I've been aware of it since I was a child. Dumbledore's face went grey. It's another one, isn't it? Harry said. A piece of Voldemort's soul lodged in me the night he tried to kill me. I have feared so. Dumbledore whispered. For 10 years I have feared so. It's contained. My mother's love and my own divine blood have kept it inert, unable to influence me or grow, but it's there, and eventually it needs to be dealt with. Harry, if it's truly a Horcrux, removing it from a living host is supposedly impossible without killing the host. Yes, I know, but I'm not a normal host, Professor. I'm the son of the goddess of magic, standing on top of the most powerful crossroads in Britain, with direct access to the divine force that created the very concept of souls. Harry smiled, and it was a fierce, bright thing, full of Lily Evans's courage and Hecate's ancient power. I'll figure it out. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. Your mother, he said softly, would be so proud of you. Harry felt the warmth in his chest, the golden light that was Lily's love, eternal and unbreakable, and nodded. I know she would. Good night, Professor. He left the office and walked back to Gryffindor Tower through a castle that hummed with awareness, with warmth, with the ancient magic of a crossroads that had been waiting 1,000 years for its guardian to arrive. Ron was asleep when Harry entered the dormitory, but he'd left a note on Harry's pillow in his messy scrawl, "Tell us everything tomorrow." Hermione says she's already started researching Horcruxes. I told her to sleep. She didn't listen. Harry smiled, changed into his pajamas and climbed into bed. Faintly, from far below, he could feel the chamber pulsing with gentle warmth. Hecate's temple, her seed of power, her gift to a castle that would one day house her son. And deeper still, contained and warded at the crossroads in the forest, Voldemort's fragment screamed silently in its prison, and Harry felt it without pity but with a strange, cold clarity. The hunt had begun.